Hello and welcome to Viking.TV with me, Gaby Huddart. For this episode of Gaby's Friends, we're here in London to talk to a writing superstar, someone whose 10 novels have been translated into 40 languages and sold millions of copies worldwide. Moreover, several of them have been turned into TV series, so captivating are their plots. Most of the books are set in Greece, and this author's passion for the country is clearly reciprocated, as in 2020 she was awarded Greek citizenship, and she now has dual nationality, both British and Greek. She's also a fluent Greek speaker and has even written a children's version of her first book, The Island, in that language. That's just a few of your wonderful achievements, Victoria Hislop, and it's great to be here today in your home to talk to you all about them. And actually, you're no stranger to Viking.TV, because I think you last spoke to us remotely during lockdown, but much nicer to be face to face today.
Yes, and last time I think I was in Crete.
Yes.
On Zoom, but here we are today in London.
Here we are in London.
And lovely to have you here.
Yeah, thank you. And perhaps we start. Obviously, your passion for Greece and your love affair with Greece has been such a big part of your story. Maybe start telling us where that all began.
Yes, I mean, people always say, "Why do you love Greece so much?" As though I'm kind of loving some very sort of dark, strange village in outer Mongolia, whereas Greece is actually very easy to love.
Yes.
But I think it really began the first moment I stepped off a plane with my mother when I was 17 years old. And the background to that trip really was that up until then, all our family holidays had been spent on the Sussex coast. And there couldn't have been a greater contrast for me. I absolutely felt this is where I want to be. And why did I never particularly enjoyed swimming in, the English Channel. I'll admit it now, but I didn't know there was anything different. And in those days, 1960s, early 70s, majority of people didn't go very far for their holidays. You got in the car and we rattled along for an hour in our Ford Poplar and arrived in Bognor Regis. There wasn't even any question. I didn't even know anybody who went to Spain or Greece or Italy or France.
Did we? Yeah.
Day trip to France, that was something people did.
Yeah.
That was very popular even then.
Yeah,
that you
going to the Calais supermarket.
Exactly. But going to Greece wasn't something that I could even be envious of anybody else doing, because we didn't do it. And,
so this was a very special holiday.
This was a very special holiday.
And then literally it was a
light bulb. It was a sunshine moment, really. Yeah. And from that holiday onwards, obviously at 17, I was about to be at university and start making travel decisions of my own. And every year from that time, I would work in the holidays, save up, and then go on a trip somewhere in Greece.
Isn't that amazing? So although you fell in love with the heat and the place, you didn't then think, oh, I'll go and travel to other places. It was always Greece that lured you back.
Yes, it was, very much so. And I've obviously subsequently been to many other places, but none of them have the same effect on me as Greece does. None of them give me that sense of joy. I mean, I love it. It's very hard not to love Italy, isn't it? Yeah. You go to Florence, you'd have to be a very strange individual to go, oh, this is ugly. But it doesn't give me that sense of almost euphoria that Greece does. There is something very special about the light and the warmth, and obviously the sea. You're never very far from the sea in Greece. It has the most extraordinarily copious amounts of coastline. There's not a straight line in Greece. It wiggles in and out. There are coves and bays on every part of even the mainland. And obviously all the islands, most of the time you're practically in walking distance.
I've just come back from Greece, but it's actually a big country, isn't it? and only 10, 11 million people. So
Yeah.
there's a really big sense of space there as well.
There
isn't there?
is, absolutely. I mean, it's not, there are towns and cities, but you can find peace and quiet in Greece as well.
Yeah, and I think you've visited more than 50 islands now.
I have.
Is that right? That's amazing.
Yes, yes. Not in order to tick boxes. It's just where my travels have taken me over the last, it's sort of 40 years now. So, and generally each summer, I will have an opportunity, it just presents itself, to visit somewhere new. I get a lot of invitations to speak by bookshops in quite obscure places in Greece.
Amazing.
I've just come back from an island called Chios, which is in the northern Aegean. And I'd heard so much about this island. It's a shipbuilding. It's famous for all the ship owners who still have houses there, and also for a mastic that oozes out of the pine trees, which is unique in the whole world. And they turn it into sort of liqueur and chewing gum and various products. So yeah, every year brings a revelation to me about something new in Greece.
How many more islands have you got to go?
Wow, there's still a lot. I mean, there are something well over 200 that have a population of some kind. So I'm really only a quarter of the way through.
Yeah. It's getting to get around. So being awarded Greek citizenship, did that come as a complete surprise? Did you know it was being considered by the government?
No,
out there? I mean,
I didn't.
How did it feel?
It was one of those things that in that lockdown year 2020, as going into lockdown itself, it was just a surprise. You could not have anticipated that. And then I never anticipated that one July day, my mobile would ring and it would be the Prime Minister's voice. And I'm pretty familiar with Greek, political voices because I listen to the radio and watch on TV whenever I can. So I knew it was him. He's got a very distinctive way of speaking. And I almost felt that I knew him. It was very strange.
Amazing.
I didn't feel, who's this stranger? I thought, here's somebody who's, I don't know, already part of my life in a very strange way. Because I'm so immersed in Greece.
Yes.
And
but it's a very rare thing.
Yes,
for
it is.
Somebody who's to be given award. It's an award. It's a recognition.
It is.
Isn't
It was a. I would say, the biggest gift I've ever been given.
Oh, how wonderful!
My children, I always, say, well, of course they're gifts in their way, but this was a slightly different kind of gift, and what it meant for me is sort of almost unquantifiable because we'd had Brexit not that long before, and in 2019 was when the kind of dots were being put on the I's of all the paperwork after 2016, and it meant for me that I became European again. So 2019 was the last European elections that the British could vote in. And so I could now vote again in the European elections. And that for me is it's almost as I already felt Greek, but after Brexit, I was devastated by that because I don't feel my first kind of primary identity is European. I really feel European culturally. Everywhere that I find aesthetically most pleasing and interesting is probably in Europe as a whole, maybe not in Britain. So that was a joy as well. It was a sort of double joy. And I now vote in the Greek elections. I vote in the local elections in Crete, where I have a house.
Oh, how fantastic!
And
did you have to go through a ceremony when
yes, there was a big, very formal ceremony. And unlike when you're born, when you are a British citizen, you don't swear allegiance in the way that you do when you become. Because
Yes.
I've been to nationality ceremonies here for a particular Greek friend who got British citizenship. And I was very much part of that whole journey with him. And I remember going up to Wembley where his ceremony was held and thinking, wow, this is really something, that someone's committing allegiance to
It's
a
quite
country,
emotional,
which we,
isn't it?
you know,
Yeah, you just take it for
we were
granted.
born
Yes,
and we
of
were
course.
British. So the Greek ceremony was a big thing for me. I had to swear this oath full of extremely long words that I was so nervous I could hardly say them, in front of the Minister of the Interior, as they call it. It always sounds very Orwellian.
And this was in Athens.
This was in
it?
Athens, yeah. Then, and there were a lot of TV cameras there. So it had I wasn't one of 20, it was just me and a lot of cameras.
Oh, amazing.
So that was quite nerve-wracking. And then I went across the road to the where the Prime Minister has his offices. That was on another side of this huge road in the centre of Athens, and had a meeting with him. Rather like this, we were both on sofas, and it was a nice discussion. And weirdly, his gift to me was actually a beautiful scarf and one of those sort of official, because we were all wearing masks.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And so he
Back
gave
in
me a
2020.
kind of decorative mask. So that was very nice. And then I went over, because in Greece is a republic, so they have a president. And then I went to the really grand building, which is the president's palace, which is all quite close, another 5 minutes walk. And the president of Greece, Katerina Sakellaropoulou, is a very respected first female president, very impressive woman, because it's still unusual to be in a position of such power. They haven't yet had a female prime minister, for example. So she's the first female president, and she had arranged a sort of reception, again, everything quite limited by the mask wearing and the conditions of those months, of some very distinguished female Greek writers. So I was suddenly in a room with probably the equivalent of, I don't know, Ishiguro or Ian McEwan.
Gosh, how amazing.
I didn't really know
Yeah.
very much about them, but they were the sort of the great and the good of Greek literature.
And how touching. I mean, the whole thing must have been really quite
Yeah,
emotional.
it was very emotional. And the then British ambassador was invited to that as well. So it was a big day, very big day. I mean, I was kind of, I remember it very clearly, like minute by minute. And I've made a sort of book out of it with all the photographs. And then I had a sort of couple of hours of just having a cup of tea with a friend. And then in the evening, had this, again, small reception for my closest Greek friends, who had all in some way helped me on this journey.
Yeah.
And we
special.
We drank champagne together.
And I mean, of course, as part of that, or before that, you learned Greek, which, having just come back from Greece and been hearing the language, it is unbelievably difficult as a language. And even on the notices, obviously it's got its own alphabet, which you can't make sense. You can't sort of think, oh, that letter's that. It's a really, really difficult language.
It's a bit like
isn't
a code. It looks like a secret code that you'd make up, when you were sort of 8 years old with your friends.
Well, I mean, to learn Greek, there aren't many people who...
Much harder than anything else I've ever done.
Yeah. How many years did it take you?
To get to a level of, I'd say, easy fluency, probably took between 10 and 12. and really, really concentrating on it. It wasn't just the odd
One-to-one
night class.
tuition and
One-to-one tuition 2 or 3 times a week, usually for 2 hours. So it was like being a student again.
yeah.
You know, doing a crash course in something. And I used to cry.
Do you sometimes dream in Greek now? Because I think that's always the thing with the language, is when you actually can.
I don't think that language plays a big role in my dreams, oddly, because I'm never aware very much of talking. They're usually just scenes.
Yeah.
So I can't say I've dreamt in Greek. A lot of my dreams take place in Greece, but the language I don't think's yet.
But when you're
into
sometimes imagining things, do you sometimes imagine things with your a story in the Greek
Yes,
language?
I imagine conversation, and when I've been there maybe for a few weeks and I come back, I'm, you know, some people don't have an inner dialogue, don't sort of talk to themselves internally, but I do a lot. And I find I'm talking to myself in Greek.
I mean, I think it's phenomenal, and the fact that you've actually written, you know, a children's book in Greek.
Yes,
well, it's amazing.
That's probably not that impressive, given how long I've been learning the language, though.
I think, and to get that level of fluency is incredible. But you are clearly someone who loves to learn, because not only learning Greek, but also learning how to dance. Because obviously in America it's called Dancing with the Stars. In the UK we call it Strictly Come Dancing. But you were a contestant on the Greek version of Dancing with the Stars in 2021, I think, 2021,
Right,
which is amazing. And you actually got really far, didn't you? In the contest.
I got about halfway through. Of course, it had the extra challenge of everything being in Greek, because I was the only English speaker there.
Yeah.
But, you know, most Greeks do speak some English, but basically the whole thing was a Greek production. But which sometimes gave me the advantage with the judges, because I could tell from their faces sometimes that they weren't saying something particularly complimentary, and I could kind of shut off and just nod and smile. And I thought, because very often the language of dancing wouldn't be something I was particularly familiar with.
Yes.
So I could kind of.
But I mean, you've always loved to dance, but it is, you know, going on that show, it's next level, isn't it? Did you love it?
I loved it and I hated it, and in equal measure.
Because it's so intense.
The intensity of it, the physical pain of it, was sometimes really almost overwhelming. And I didn't usually feel that until I got home after the long rehearsals. And then I think I cracked a rib. Wow. Because, you know, you've done a bit of dancing yourself. I know when they grabbed me for a hold, and I couldn't sleep for virtually the whole time I was involved in the programme on that side. And I had a lot of physio, a lot of massage. I used to lie in a hot bath for hours every night to try and kind of relax my muscles. So I did find it physically very strenuous. And at the time, it's no secret, but I'd had breast cancer about 9 months before I began. And the drugs I was taking were also contributing to this sort of real achiness in my bones. So I think I had that on top of actually.
So really good.
So I was in pain a lot, and every week I'd get through my live dance, which I always did miraculously without putting a foot wrong. But when we were standing on the steps waiting for what they call the apochrisi, which is the departure.
Yes.
And if your name isn't read, you know, gradually you're the one left who's got to fly home. So every week there were these lovely, beautiful, smiley couples like they always are. And I was sort of standing draped around my partner with a big smile, my feet killing me. And I'd be thinking, please don't read my name, please don't read my name. And then I'd hear my name being read, so we could sort of skip off into the wings and go, oh, good, we're in for another week. And I was actually thinking, not another week, please.
Oh, but I mean, amazing to get so far. And presumably,
but then I did love it. I did love it too.
It as well. But I mean, I think we all see the sparkle and the glamour, and the. I mean, I think there have been stories, obviously, recently about how grueling it is. But it's romantic to look at it, isn't it? And
it's gorgeous.
And
the whole.
But it is
the
set, hard work.
But you see just the moments that are the good moments in those sort of 3 dance minutes that you do once a week. So yes, it's and anybody who really believes all that behind the scenes stuff, who really thinks, oh, they're laughing and ha ha ha, and it's all great, because all of that is, in my view, very staged.
Yes.
And they were the bits where I felt I was being most fake, was when they come into the rehearsal room with the cameras and, say, what are you doing this week? And you have to be, and actually inside you're just either very exhausted or wanting, I don't know, just wanting a break or something. So there's a lot of, for me, that was the hard bit.
Because
you've
got to be on all the time.
Yes.
All the time.
And be very smiley.
Yes.
And they'd say, so, this is all in Greek. I think I might be better at lying in a foreign language. So Victoria, why are you so keen to win? What's motivating this desire you have to win? And I'd look at, if I was in a bad mood, I'd say, I don't want to win. And what gives you the idea that I want to win? Because it was clearly ridiculous that I might win. Because we had Olympic athletes. We had like gymnasts and swimmers from the Olympic Games and models and, people much more suited to winning Dancing with the Stars. So I'd have to make something up about why I really wanted to win. And I found that, if I'm honest,
quite hard. Yeah.
I'm not being negative about the show, because the friend, in fact, the woman who invented it is Greek, and she had left London to oversee the Greek edition.
Oh, amazing.
Fenya, who's a lovely woman, but I'm not even sure that the producers really know what's going on behind the scenes. So the other day, she was saying to me, I'm really upset that all this is going on with this program that I loved so much. And I said, well, I don't know what you really think was happening behind all those smiles. But did you ever notice that maybe a few of us were missing during rehearsals and we were in the loos sobbing?
Oh,
do you know what I mean?
Yes.
That's the reality. I think it's showbiz.
Yeah.
I think it's showbiz.
But also, that 3 minutes is really, to get that pretty damn near perfect week after week. It's
perfect
really,
in front of cameras who are swinging. That's something you don't see when you're watching on the TV. The cameras are coming in. They've already worked out from watching your dance before when they're going to swing in, and when there's going to be someone behind you, and when there's going to be someone on your feet, and you're incredibly conscious that you can't get in the camera's way. You've got all of this in your head, and you're squeezed into a skin-tight,
tiny
little dress with these. I've got bunions
from
I had them anyway. They couldn't find shoes wide enough for me.
Yeah.
So,
also
on heels like that with your bunions,
however,
pain. Anyway, but it was lovely. It was lovely.
And presumably the aftermath, you now, I imagine, if you weren't before, very recognisable for Greek people. When
Oh,
you're
in Greek,
travelling.
yeah.
Because you're heroine of
Yes.
of Strictly, or Dancing with the Stars.
Mm.
How do they treat you? So when you're travelling in Greece and going to, you're are you warmly welcomed wherever you go as a
Yes,
sort of a
people are
celebrity?
lovely. People are lovely to
Mm,
me. I get extra, boiled sweets on aeroplanes. They say, "Oh, do you have 2 or 3?" Well, thank you very much, because they still do that on Greek planes. They give you a sweet when you get on board. So I usually get a couple of extra sweets. No, people are
so they
kind.
selfies with you when you're
I do a lot of selfies. Yes, which
so
people like to have. I don't know what they do with them, but
it's lovely, isn't it, that they welcomed you?
Yeah, I'm very
you're
much accepted, and
as one of theirs, and
and it's just I dip into that in Greece, and then I dip out of it.
Yes, yeah.
When I'm
now,
here.
I think I'm right in saying that The Return obviously was set in Spain, but pretty much all your other books, all of them are in Greece. What is it? I mean, obviously you're passionate about it, but when you get there, that sort of speaks to you, that stories come into your head when you're there, and that you see stories. Can you identify what it is about Greece that sparks for you these amazing story ideas that you've had over the years?
Well, they're generally, I think in all cases, it's because I've been alert to the events of their 20th century, because when you're in what's still a foreign country to me, although I am Greek citizen, it is still another place. Everything I see there is slightly more, I'm more alert.
Yes.
If I walk down the street here, I don't think I see things in the same way. Whereas in Greece, I'll always, if there's a monument or something funny in a shop window, or someone says something to me that I want to understand better, then I start digging away. And I think it's their 20th century that was so full of challenge, which is sort of understatement.
Yeah,
really.
I mean, your latest book, which I've just read on holiday, which is great, reading The Figurine while in Greece. I have to say, I feel very ashamed that I didn't know more about modern Greek history. And it's obviously it's a novel, but you have researched obviously very very thoroughly the history, and it's a great way of learning about modern Greek history. But I did feel really ashamed that I didn't know more, and how
most of us don't.
How tough it was. I mean, I knew a bit about Second World War, and parts of Greece were occupied by the Nazis and so on, but didn't know what had happened in the post-war era at all, and how tough that had been.
It didn't really. The occupation was just part of what happened in. It wasn't the main event. Then they had a civil war, and then they had a whole really difficult period for anybody who was on the losing side, i.e. the left.
Yeah.
And then they had a military dictatorship, and then you throw in the odd earthquake, and periods of huge economic hardship. Every 10 years there was something that kind of sunk them low again. And the period that I write about most in The Figurines historical backdrop is that dictatorship in the sort of 60s and 70s, which was sort of during my lifetime, and that sometimes feels very warm. Something, the occupation. I wasn't alive then, and they had a famine and the Civil War. That was before. But even if you were a child and you didn't know it was going on, because I was obviously in Britain then, the idea that Greece, even at a time when they were developing tourism, was ruled by these 3 colonels, who were, not just persecuting but torturing people, sending them to islands of exile.
Yeah.
There was a lot of
Brutal,
darkness
yeah.
going on beneath the surface. And, if you disagreed with the regime, life would be difficult for you. So all of that really stirs my imagination because, I can put a character in there that isn't me. Helena isn't me, but
No, I was
I
going
can
to say,
kind
but
of live it.
she is. I mean, my understanding of all your characters in all the books, she is the one that's the most autobiographical,
Yes,
still
I would
closest to
say
you,
she is.
Helena.
Yeah.
And can you tell us how she's similar to you and how she's different to you?
Well, she is actually half Greek and half Scottish, and for all sorts of reasons, I didn't want her to be English. I still wanted her to, because to me, that's quite an interesting mix, the Greeks and the Scots, because you always think of the Edinburgh of the North, and she does go up to Edinburgh, so the Athens of the North, goes up there on a holiday, but she's born at the same time that I was born. She grows up in a small, quite dull but safe little town, and I think I'd always wanted to do a bit of a description of my own environment when I was growing up, for no particular reason, just a desire to kind of encapsulate it and have it down on paper. Because I think that the 60s and the 70s and the early 80s and probably into the late 80s, but certainly the 60s, 70s decades would be unrecognisable now to a 20-something travelling back in time. They would go, this can't only be, let's say, 50. It feels like, where are the dinosaurs? Are they going to pop up? Everything was, I'm afraid, in my view, was charmingly different. Apart from anything, I couldn't ever write a novel with a mobile phone in it. I don't know how people do that. Ruins all the plot line. You can't have it. But the safety of it, feeling very safe, going on buses to places with your friends, going to the Wimpy Bar, sort of very small things being very precious and big, and the food that people ate,
the food that we ate
was very basic. But then if you did go out, which was rare for I think most people, in most towns, if you were lucky, there might be an Italian restaurant, a trattoria with big peppercorns and I don't know, flaming there was always a lot of showmanship, and it was always something incredibly special, a treat. Whereas nowadays, lots of people pop out for a pizza or what shall we have?
You do really evoke that with Helena, the era, and also, bring it to life. And her personality, she's an observer, isn't she, of a lot of things. She's not a real extrovert, life and soul, but she's watching, isn't she? She's absorbing intelligently. And was that like?
Yes, I think that's probably quite like me. I'm always, I'm not the sort of show off in the room. I'd rather be, I always think myself as a sort of beta personality, and I like alpha people, but I'm not one of them. And her early days at university, that experience, which I think is very different now.
Yes.
It somehow was more innocent.
Yeah.
And there was a little bit more of an us and them, which I don't kind of go into, a bit like the Saltburn film, where you've got the grammar school comprehensive kids, and I was one of those, with the posh public school boys and girls, and there's a bit of a kind of feeling of difference. So all of that, I just wanted to put it down on paper. And
I want to ask you something else about Helena in a minute, but before because there's something very specific to her character, but at the heart of the story, as the sort of title implies, the figurine, it's also about the ancient treasures of Greece.
Yeah.
So you've got this modern history, you've got this modern story, but also it's looking at archaeological digs and discovering these treasures. Can you just explain to the audience about the figurines and why they're so valuable?
Yeah.
And also, they are still being found even today, aren't they?
One that looked a bit like this, and she's very typical example in size and shape and the way she's standing, and very typical figurine. Was sold for over $16 million.
Wow.
Not that long ago in New York. So for lots of reasons they're valuable. I mean, they're very ancient. They're usually between 4,000 and 5,000 years old. And most of the examples are actually found broken. So if one is whole, then obviously
rare.
she's got a very high premium. And back in the 19th century, when they were discovered by archaeologists at that time, they were considered ugly because this was not a style that anybody thought had any artistic kind of merit, really, because people if you'd found something like the the Venus of Milos, more classical sculptures, when they were discovered, that was the style that was beautiful. Whereas something like this, so kind of simple and pared down, didn't have the same artistic appeal. And then the sort of modern artists like Picasso and Modigliani, they saw them, and they absolutely fell in love with them and recognised some kind of more sort of primitive, humanity pared down.
Yes, it does look quite Picasso.
Yes,
face,
and
it?
It's very if you look at a lot of his work, you go, before you see one of these or a copy, then you think, oh, how come they were copying Picasso? But it's actually the other way around, and you see a lot of facial shapes and simplified bodies in his work that are very much a sort of homage.
I find it amazing, 5,000 years old, and they're still being discovered, obviously, today, which is amazing. And, that obviously is at the heart of this story as well. And, it's obviously, don't want to do any spoilers, but it's, partly a love story. And
yes, it's a love story, but it's also a story of betrayal.
Well, that was back to the character of Helena. The thing that I really liked is, although she's kind of quite soft and quite innocent, she has got a very steely core, hasn't she?
She does.
And I quite liked the fact that she's out to wreak revenge in the end. On when she's wronged. And I don't think that's often something that people don't do with female characters. And it was delicious, the fact that she was going to wreak revenge on these people who did her and did the figurines and did the treasures wrong.
Yeah, but that
must be
to
fun,
me is her Greek side.
Yeah.
She, as a child, you see a much more soft Scottish, British side to her, and then the Greek starts to kind of flourish a bit more. And from time to time there's sort of glimpses of this play that she sees for the first time when she's at Oxford, of Medea. And if you look at any Greek tragedies, there's nothing soft. Very often the women are full of anger and revenge, and they won't rest until they have achieved
people of action.
Absolutely. And revenge generally is not getting your own back by, puncturing someone's tyres. It's killing them or killing someone they love. And Medea is a sort of most extreme example of that, because of course she kills her own children in order to hurt the man who's betrayed her. So she becomes more of a Medea, let's say, and less of a Desdemona.
Yes, yeah, well, she doesn't actually murder. She doesn't actually murder. She does it the right side of the law. But yes, it is quite delicious. I mean, there's so much in this book, but you do an inordinate amount of research, I should imagine, before starting. You know, you've researched the ancient treasures, you've researched the modern history. How long does that part of the process take when you come up with the idea for a book, but then you're working on the research?
And then it's usually a couple of years to do as much as I possibly can, so that in this case, you know, went on an excavation, spent lots of time with archaeologists and in museums and travelling to different islands where they have these figurines. Finding out more about junta, and then there are some aspects of the Civil War that I wasn't aware of when I've written former books. Went to Sotheby's a few times to watch an auction, because that plays a big role towards the end of the story, where one of these figurines is being auctioned. So I had to wait until the right thing. I wanted to actually see what might happen.
Yeah.
So yes, it's not a fast process.
So 2 years
for me.
research and then about a year writing?
Yes, a good solid year of writing.
Amazing. Yeah. And then your first reader, I understand, is your daughter Emily.
Yes, Emily. Yeah. Yes.
So why Emily?
Because she's extremely clever. She's a journalist and has quite a concise style. She's the opposite of flowery in her writing, and she'll always pick me up on any kind of repetition or anything that's not kind of convincing to her. And I have enormous sort of
that's amazing,
intellectually,
and probably in the way
respect.
with family that you respect her, but also she can probably give you criticism in a way that somebody who's not family couldn't, maybe.
Yes, well, I can't take it from Ian. So
Ian is your husband, for anyone watching who doesn't know.
Ian, and I'm married to Ian,
and he's a very well-known journalist here in the UK as well. So yeah,
and we were at university together.
Yes, so he can't criticise you.
No, and I can't. We're too. I think it's because I know that he's probably more intellectual than I am, and maybe what he'll say is right, but I won't want to accept it. So it's complicated.
Irritating, yes.
I mean, I do know novelists who, chapter by chapter, they feed it to a willing wife and the other way round, but not in this house.
No, but it's great. You've grown your own.
I've grown Emily, and she, like both of us, read English at Oxford, so her powers of literary analysis and criticism are, I think, actually much more rigorous than when we were there at the time that Helena was there, when we didn't even have to write footnotes. We didn't have to put a bibliography at the end of an essay. It was really lax and loose, and we could plagiarise. You know, Ian used to rent out his essays to anyone who would pay because they were very good. Yeah. And nowadays, you know, they run every essay through a
checker,
a check program. Yeah. Which is, so Emily, I believe, is much more rigorous than either of us.
Now, while we're on talking about reading, First Reader, I did want to talk to you about one of your charities that you support, because it's the National Literacy Trust. You have a deep and passionate support of this amazing charity here in the UK, and actually Viking in the UK are now also supporting the charity. So
it would be a better one.
Yes, it would be nice if you could talk to us a little bit about why the National Literacy Trust is so important to you, and a little bit about the work it does.
Absolutely. Well, in various different sectors, I mean, I suppose the primary one is children, because, you know, it's shocking that there are children under 5. I think they say about 1 in 5, maybe 2 in 5, that doesn't have a book in the house. And when you've grown up taking books for granted because you had a school library and a local library and your mum and dad had books, they're just like oxygen. That's what you breathe. But a lot of young children today don't have any of that. Schools aren't able to supply it and home isn't able to supply it. And without those necessary literacy skills, apart from the pleasure of reading, but just the ability to read allows us to play our role in society, to grow up and get jobs. So on that very basic educational level, it's clearly something that governments haven't been focusing enough on.
Yeah, and for lifetime, and I mean, it isn't just a UK issue, but
no,
it's, and I think it's a, an issue in the US as well, and obviously in a lot of Europe. But, life chance is almost being decided by a child, the time a child is 5 or 6, just seems appalling, really.
Yes, it does. And there's a very strong connection between lack of literacy and the prison population. They say that there are about 80,000 people in custody, which I assume means in prison.
Yes.
And the average literacy level is of an 11-year-old. And I think that speaks for itself, that if you haven't had the opportunity as a young, early on, then you can fall, out of off the straight and narrow. And that's incredibly unfair. We all know that if we live in a sort of home with books, with parents who read to us, so that's probably going to have a knock-on effect for the children of those dads, mums who might be in prison, that they won't have also given the love of books to their children.
Yes, and you're right. I mean, it is the love of books, the joy, the pleasure, the escapism.
Yeah, it's not as though it's something so awful to do, is it?
No.
Reading stories, it's got to be, we believe and we know, one of life's great pleasures.
And also, your career has been based on literacy. My career as a journalist has been. You need it for working life as well.
But even for every job, you need just to negotiate the outside world. Reading is a really fundamental skill.
So do you go to events for the National Literacy
Yes,
Trust? Do you speak at things for them?
Yeah. And I've been into prison for them, and for some reason I'm much better with the prisoners than I am with little children. Although I've had little children of my own, I'm always slightly not scared of small children, but I don't know, they can be somehow harder to communicate with. But someone in prison, I don't know, it's not pity, it's just thinking, but for circumstance, I could be here. I can identify with that.
Yeah. If
I hadn't, happened to be grown up in the family I grew up in, that's just, it's all chance. And so, going into prison makes you realise that, and that that could be you.
No, it's an amazing charity, and they're really, they do so much, work at opening school libraries and primary schools, getting books into the hands of children who wouldn't otherwise.
And it's a physical thing, a book, and relatively it's a small thing. It can be £5 or an £8
is that
book.
For you? Because I know you're also involved with another charity called Lepro, which is obviously a global charity to
raise awareness of leprosy. Yeah,
which is obviously related to the island. Your first ever book, but is that one of the joys of your position now and where you've got to in life, that you have a platform now for giving back?
Yeah,
essentially.
Definitely, and because we could give back, all of us, in 1,000 different ways, but it's like it focuses you, it gives it more sort of meaning. So if you're, for example, with the leprosy fundraising. I have been now to quite a few working leprosy hospitals, and I've been to closed leprosariums, and I'm kind of immersed in it, and I have perhaps a slightly unique experience, so I feel I can do that.
Yeah.
And with the National Literacy Trust, it is just a no-brainer for writers to support that. How can you say, oh no, I'll support something else instead? No, that really does seem to be at the grassroots of how to grow up in our society, where we aren't robots yet. Reading is a minute by minute, not just pleasure, but a skill that we have to have.
Everybody has to have. Now, before we go, because I'm taking lots of your time, but I just wonder whether you could reveal to us what you're working on at the moment, because obviously the figurine was out in paperback, goes out in paperback now.
Yes,
but that must mean there's another book in the pipeline.
There's another one in that sort of mid stage of research, so it's probably another 6 months till I start writing it. So at the moment, as always happens, if you promote your foreign editions, I'm still travelling a bit in Greece to promote what's known as doidolio in Greek. So my mind is still slightly preoccupied with the previous one.
Yeah. Can you any clues about the next one?
Well, it's set in Greece,
yes,
and that's probably all I'll tell you.
And can I ask, are you also an avid reader of other books?
Yes.
When are you?
Yes.
Sort of, and any particular, is it similar genre to your own, or right across the board?
No, I wouldn't say right across the board, because there are certain genres that I never read. I never read crime. I don't want to start with the dead body and who killed that. I don't want anything that's too unpleasant, which perhaps sounds a bit pathetic, but it's not what I read for. I've literally just finished Anne Tyler's new one. It's actually not coming out for a few months, but somebody so kindly sent me a proof, and it's called 3 Days in June, and it's her writing. My favourite writers are all deceptively simple in the way that they write, and in a phrase they can give you a whole character. So I love reading Anne Tyler, because I think she is the best at that. And I've now
books aren't hugely long, are they? But
they feel amazing. After
yes. Anything else on your bedside table, or recommendations that you can give
strong recommendation is William Boyd's new novel called Gabriel's Moon, and I've got about 50 pages of that to go, and I'm slightly obsessed with it, because there are a lot of characters, but they're all very clearly defined and clearly drawn, and it is a bit of a it's a thriller, actually. And he was my tutor way back at Oxford.
Wow.
So I always feel excited about reading his next book. So I always have them as soon as I buy them in hardback, or he kindly sends one to us.
Well, I bet he's very proud of you as well, isn't he?
I don't know. I've no idea, but
I bet he is.
He's in a slightly different level. I'd say he's probably more literary than I am, but he writes very good stories, and I do want a good story, whether it's about someone's wedding, which is new Anne Tyler, or in this one a little bit more. In fact, this new one of William Boyd's is set in sort of 60s period, so it's sort of that little flavours of people are always going to the pub. There's no wine bars, there's no mobile phones, and what they eat. I just love slightly being whisked back, not to the 19th century, but middle of the 20th century. I rather love that.
Oh, fantastic. Well, a couple of great recommendations there. So thank you. And thank you so much for such an interesting conversation. We've spanned lots of things today, haven't we?
Dancing, prisons,
and
all sorts.
when the new book comes out, which is probably then not next year, the year after, it'd be lovely to come and see you then and talk about that book, please.
Absolutely
But for today, thank
to.
you, Victoria Hislop. It's been brilliant. Thank you. Thank you.